Greater Good Radio. Connect, learn, heal, and grow.
So you have 3 kids.
3. Matthew, Ryan, Laura.
If you could only have one memory of each of them.
Oh.
We'll go Matthew first.
I was born, my first son when he was born, and I knew we were going to have a boy. But, I think right from the get-go, that whole thing about I'm really actually a father, I mean, that's a big thing in your life. And actually, in anticipation of coming, he's the reason why I left coaching. Because Kathleen was pregnant, and we weren't making any money when I was coaching. I was making $15,300 a year. And so when Matt really showed up, in September, it changed a lot. The reality of his being in the world, the one thing is about you're going to have a baby, but not you really have a baby, That was a real shift for me. In fact, his birth, I would tell you honestly, in retrospect, I resigned from coaching on March 4th, 1977. I started on March 7th at KGMB on a Monday. I resigned on a Friday. I spent the first 6 months, I had such a strong identity as a coach and my connection with the community and everything else. I really felt sorry for myself. I mean, I didn't go into TV sales and suddenly decided to take off. I went around going places, feeling bad that I was no longer coaching and the big sacrifice. This is the memory. When Matt was born, he had some jaundice, and he had to stay in the incubator. He was very healthy. He was born 3 weeks early, but he was 7 pounds, like 12 ounces. But he had this jaundice, and we had to put him on these bilirubin lights. There was an outbreak of salmonella in the hospital. There was several kids that died. Matt survived, but I was sitting there. This is a God's truth that sounds like it's out of a movie. On a Saturday night, it was the first UH football game that I wasn't coaching. There he was, in the incubator in his diaper, all hooked up. Only lights in the room, like in a nursery, were the lights from the bilirubin lights in the incubator. And my then wife had her hands in there on him. She had fallen asleep out of exhaustion. I'm sitting there listening to a UH football game on a transistor radio. And they're introducing the players, most of whom I had recruited, going to play for Dick Tomey. I realized in that moment with my son there fighting for his life and the fact that I knew I was feeling sorry for myself, but the reality was the world was going to go on without me. It was in that setting that I said some things to myself about growing up. I was 30 years old. And in fact, it was only a few days before turning 31. Matt was born September 4th, and then September 15th was my 31st birthday. So that was a turning point for me. It really was. And I was determined that I was going to go forward and make something of myself. The rest of it became what it became.
So if this was the last time you could leave a message to him, what would you say?
Oof, come on, you're punishing me today. I mean, it's sort of what my mother said to me. I love you, Matt, as only a father could love a son. I hope that you realize what that means since you have your own son. It's just as deep and as profound as it gets.
I felt that. How about the second child?
When I was in the 2nd grade at Kahala Elementary, we knew there was something not working with him, And so we had all these tests done. And I was sitting down with the neurologist telling me that he was going to be challenged from a learning standpoint. He had severe learning disabilities. And she said, I'm not even sure, if this kid comes home with a C, you better hug him. His brain synapses are not connecting. And he's probably not going to be able to ride a skateboard or a bike. He may not get out of high school. You're going to have to rethink your whole life with this kid. Ryan could ride a skateboard, rode a bike, graduated from high school, played football in high school, graduated from college, did all the shit that they told me he was never going to do. But nothing ever came easy for Ryan. My then wife couldn't deal with him because he was kind of an imperfect kid. She had him in a school for deaf and blind kids. We had since divorced, and so I had him come live with me and took him out of that. and just kept believing in him and helped him just overcome the odds, which he did on his own, but it was all because somebody believed and loved him. And so for me, it was a long journey with Ryan. He just left last year. Back with a sweetheart of his from college, and so I'm really relieved. But yeah, Ryan was special schools, pathologist, neurologist. People teach him how to speak, a lot of stuff like that.
So if we go into that a little bit, maybe one moment you remember with him that's the most meaningful to you.
Oh, there were a lot of them, because when he was a little boy, I remember I said he could ride a skateboard and a bike and stuff. He was playing Little League, and he was pretty good. Actually turned out to be a pretty good little tennis player when he was younger. He seemed to defy, all this stuff that, when they tell you that stuff. I think one of the things that I really remember was up at St. Johnsbury Academy. I put him in a boarding school because I'd had this job running River City Broadcasting. He had moved in with me. He did his 8th grade with me. So I did the research on schools that could help kids with special learning needs and stuff. And this school tucked away up in St. Johnsbury, Vermont was one of them. And we went back there to visit it together and put him in this boarding school. And years later, he graduates that day, being up there. And I'd gone up to see him up in Vermont, 43 miles south of the Canadian border. He got his diploma, like we did it, because he knew what he was up against. And he got into colleges too, and he graduated. So he figured it out. But I remember him saying, we did it, Dad. Wow, it's sad because Ryan would be a great dad, and it's too bad in a sense because I think if he had a son, he would, I would say to him, I couldn't have loved you more. Could not have loved you more, Ryan. God bless you. Yeah.
Okay. And then your daughter.
My daughter was a surprise to start out with. And it was great to have a girl.
She knew that before, right?
Well,
before you just said it.
Yeah, she was a surprise.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't thinking about having a third child.
Mm.
That wasn't in the offering. And the fact that it was a girl was terrific. I never thought about it. Just seemed when Ryan came along and Matt, and having a couple of boys seemed very natural. I never saw myself being the father of a daughter. I didn't have a sister, and so that was a big deal. And Laura was, in so many ways, she was easy. She was big. She was 11 pounds at birth. She had teeth at 3 months, and her hair was growing fast. She walked at 9 months. She was smart. She was all of that. Today, she's a mother of 4 kids.
If you could take one memory,
Laura?
You and her.
Oh, boy.
You and her. One memory.
Yeah.
And that's it. Every other memory's gone.
Wow. There's those memories when she was too little that she wouldn't remember. I'll take the last memory when she came out here and surprised me for my inauguration. The look of pride in her eyes, my being her dad, said a lot. I know she was even going to come. He knew. I didn't know she was coming. I think you want your kids to feel proud of you, and, if you can, and to be at this stage now at 78 and doing what I'm doing, I think it's kind of blown her away. I think that my longevity, if you will, and staying as active is involved and is giving her a whole different perspective on what she has to look forward to, because she's, with 4 kids right now is kind of clamped down, but there's a big future out there. And I think more than anything, I think she's proud of the fact that I'm taking on such an enormous responsibility. I try to be the best father I could to her, but I'm also a good guy. I think she respects that. She takes a lot of pride in that.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.